Back then, it was just trying it out, changing something, pushing it live, seeing how it changed it, and just learning from there how things work.
I was like, this is the future. This is something, because at that point, I actually taught myself how to, do theming. But
the people who have success stories have some element of, I broke through the wall. I was going to throw in the towel. I was going to quit. I decided not to. I kept going and all that kind of stuff. Like, that's always the first thing I encourage people to do is just, right. I think those companies will evolve their offering so they're not solely like page builder based, because I think they're starting to understand WordPress will cannibalize some of their right. business. And that night, on a Friday night in a tent in the woods, I said to myself, okay, this is too much. I can't do it all.
Hi guys, welcome to another episode of Magazine 3 TV. Today we have a very special guest with us. He is the developer advocate at WP Engine. He's also the partner at Copyblogger Media. He was the co-creator at Studio Press, which was the company behind the Genesis theme. And he is the developer of the most iconic theme that was ever created on the planet, Revolution theme. Brian Gardner, thank you so much for doing this. Welcome to the show.
Thank you very much. Very happy to be here.
I'm glad you took the time to, have a conversation with us. So Brian, what's going on these days? What's up?
What's up? Well, WordPress 6.0 is right around the corner, as you know. And with that comes a lot more of the full site editing capability. I know for us at WP Engine, the team, Nick and I are on the developer relations team. We're doing a lot of work with the Gutenberg plugin. So it's all very familiar to us right now. But it'll be really, really nice to see that stuff in WordPress core and for the general user base to have access to the same stuff we've been working with. So
that's cool. Have you used WordPress 6.0 and what was your first impression?
I just recently installed the release candidate through the WordPress beta tester plugin, but essentially I've been working on it for months now as the Gutenberg plugin has continually been shipped and updating with all of the features that we'll see in 6.0. So everything that's in 6.0, I've already seen by way of the plugin.
What are your thoughts on future FSE, like full site editing? Do you see that taking over the whole page builder thing?
I do. I think there's two parts to what's coming. There's sort of the paradigm shift of building sites and content with blocks, which is somewhat connected to, but also very different than the actual full site editing experience, because full site editing is really more around like the template hierarchy of the theme and the structure of that. Whereas, using the block editor and patterns and the global styles and stuff like that is really more about like the designing of the content. And so I think sometimes people confuse terminology with WordPress right now because there's so much going on. I feel like the full site editing piece is still further behind, but building websites now with blocks and patterns and stuff like that, I think is really, really going to be fun and interesting.
Right. I know you are doing wonderful stuff with Frost WP, and I think there's this new theme you had already launched a few weeks ago, I guess, maybe?
Yeah. So I have a theme that I'm using on my personal site now. It's called Avant-Garde. It's believe it or not, 15 or 16 years later, it's the first ever theme I've submitted to the WordPress.org theme repository. So there's that, but I'm also working on sort of another theme. This is more of a colorful and gradient based theme, which I've yet to decide what the final name is going to be or how it's going to be used. But it's sort of exploratory work into something I'm doing on the side.
Yeah, I've seen that tweet of yours. It's too colorful, I guess. It takes us in the gradient, Web 2.0 gradient era.
Yep.
Yeah, but I think it's coming back with the Web 3, I guess, since Web 3 has become a stuff, maybe.
Yeah, there's a lot. I've seen a lot of stuff lately with gradients, duotones and gradients and just sort of creative use of color. And I'm really excited about that because historically I've really been more a black and white designer, and I'm really enjoying my time with color. So
I can see that. I remember if I just look at the Genesis default theme, it was black and white. And again, Revolution was the same. So since you talked about historically, help us understand what got you into the WordPress.
All right. So back in 2006, which is a long time ago, I was working at an architectural firm here in Chicago. I was
Wow.
doing designing laboratory space and working on project management and stuff like that
Mhm.
for a company. And I just started blogging on the side just for fun, just as a way of, creative expression. And I like to write. So WordPress was what I was suggested to use. And so I didn't realize it then, but as I started doing that, I wanted my site or my theme or design to look differently. So there was no design controls or settings inside WordPress dashboard back then. So you really had to open up a theme and start hacking away at the theme files.
Right. And at that point, you had installed the whole WordPress?
Yeah, I had figured out how to install WordPress. I had downloaded a theme called Pool, Pool, by Borja Fernandez. I'll still never forget that because I took that, I essentially forked it and just rewrote it all. And that is what ultimately served as the foundation of Revolution. So
Wow.
I taught myself WordPress. I started blogging about it. I built up an audience around it through that and free themes that were available. People started asking me to do customizations. And so it turned into like a little bit of a freelance business. And one of the designs I came up with for a real estate agent in Boston was the Revolution theme. He didn't like that design. He wanted to go in a different direction. So we went in a different direction, but I was left with that theme. And so I asked my audience, would you buy a WordPress theme? And there was a resounding sentiment that they would. And so I packaged it up, I sold it and started making money.
I'm glad he didn't like it because
Me too.
Revolution theme has literally changed the life of thousands of people. I know it has for me because the moment I saw Revolution theme, I was blown away. I was like, this is the future. This is something because at that point, I actually taught myself how to, do theming, but I always had that kind of a design in my mind. But I could never pull it off. And the moment I saw, I was like, wow, in the perfect world, if I had all the, knowledge and the time and the efforts, I would create something like this. So Brian, as a designer, how were you able to manage, because at that time things were there were no tutorials kind of what we have today.
Sure.
So as a designer, how did you get that mindset of, okay, let me get this PHP, let me get this set up on localhost and, because for a designer, they don't really think of themselves as a coder or a developer.
Yeah, for me, it was really about CSS. That's in style sheets. Okay. That's really where most of my work came. Once I sort of formatted the theme files to like just regular, PHP calls and WordPress things, I didn't really touch that much. It was really more around exploring CSS, using Google, how to do this, how to do that, how to change this, and like, what do all these things mean? And so it's really no different now. Of course, we've got, access to teaching websites and Teachable and LinkedIn Learning and all that kind of stuff. But back then it was just trying it out, changing something, pushing it live, seeing how it changed it, and just learning from there how things work.
True. So it was the love of CSS that pushed the envelope further.
Yeah.
And I remember it was just CSS tricks and list apart and a couple of more blog. I think Tuts Plus was there back in the day, which were creating a lot of tutorials. So then you shifted to Revolution, right? And then what exactly happened to the Revolution? Like, did it and I never really got to I never really understood what happened at the end.
So as Revolution was taking off, I received a cease and desist letter from a company in the United Kingdom saying that I was causing confusion in the marketplace. I didn't know much about any of all of that. So I contacted a lawyer and he said, you probably might want to just reconsider renaming it just because it's not worth the hassle.
Right.
So I chose StudioPress. And so back in 2007 or 8 or whenever it was, Revolution rebranded as StudioPress. And of course, from there, the theme library started to grow. And after having several themes that were individual themes, I reached out to Nathan Rice and I said, there's got to be a better system because it feels like every time I update one thing in one theme, I got to do it across all the themes. Is there a way that we could build something where there's like a shared code base, but then we could do designs independent of that? And that's sort of when we came up with Genesis and the parent-child theme set up. And from there, StudioPress really took off.
Right. So I remember back in the day, there was just two big competitors, right? Thesis and Genesis.
Mm-hmm.
And for some reason, we don't want to get into the drama of it, but yeah, Thesis didn't do well. And then there was only, Genesis. And then
Mm-hmm.
industry has slowly shifted away from, using a framework to now the new theming is very different. It's just
Sure.
one file, right?
Yeah,
Your
like
thoughts on that.
page builders sort of kind of came in between that, right? Where what page builders did was essentially serve up like a GUI for users to like do things within the dashboard without having to get into code and stuff like that.
Right.
And we all have our opinions around the benefits and the drawbacks of using page builders and so on. And
True.
I think what we're seeing now with full site editing features in WordPress is that it's becoming its own sort of page builder in a sense. And I have always, all the way back to when I started, always defaulted to sort of WordPress core best practices. And so we never reinvented anything or built our own versions of things. And so for me, this is like it's a breath of fresh air, because it's like finally WordPress has allowed us to do stuff that we could just work directly with the core code.
Right.
And so I'm excited about that. That's probably what I'm most excited about is leveraging all that the block editor now provides. Right, a couple of years ago when it first started, we were at a different place, and I wasn't so sure about the way future WordPress was going to go. But recently, with the inclusion of more blocks and things of that nature, I'm really excited. It's the best time right now for WordPress.
Absolutely. What is the future of WordPress themes from the point of view of development?
Well, obviously the block themes, which are sort of been what they're called now, to differentiate between classic themes and hybrid themes. See how confusing this is. So block themes are now built in a way that takes full advantage. They're not PHP based, they're HTML based, and they leverage the patterns and the code that comes out of the editor. And so, and the newest of technology and like the biggest sort of diversion from where we've been is this theme.json file, which is starting to sort of serve as the new style sheet, even though right now both are, basically still part of a WordPress theme. And so because of where WordPress has gone and with all of the blocks and the design controls and settings and stuff like that, and we're going to soon see the style engine and global styles, I'm starting to get to the point where I feel like one theme is all you'll ever need, right? Like in a sense, because you can serve patterns, you can change styles and do things that sort of have typically required just individual themes. Now, there's still, I think, arguments to be made for very niche specific things to just still serve a single theme for a single purpose. But one of the challenges I'm facing now, or I've presented myself, is especially with this theme with colors, is how far can you take one theme? It's kind of like a fun challenge. You can make it look so many different ways, and I'm really looking forward to unpacking that.
Interesting. So I think we've got FSE now, and a lot of block themes are there, and WordPress is powering all of that. And then we have third-party developers creating page builders, Elementor, Brizy, Divi, right? And they that use case is always there. I mean, we cannot say that use case isn't. I mean, those page builders are practical. It works for some people or some part of the audience. What do you see in the next couple of years? Maybe by 2025, we will be sitting here. And what do you see happening in a couple of years?
While I agree that there are several use cases for those page builders, I think the distance between kind of the page builder movement and what WordPress core is capable of doing is going to very quickly close. I think a lot of people will, once WordPress ships all of the features and they feel more complete and it doesn't feel quite as messy, I think people who build websites, with those Divi, Elementor, and so on, Beaver Builder, we'll see them starting to like be curious around new WordPress and how that works. And I think over time, we're going to see people sort of abandoning maybe those page builders just for core WordPress. I think as we've seen with the Elementor sort of cloud hosted thing, I think those companies will evolve their offering so they're not solely like page builder based, because I think they're starting to understand WordPress will cannibalize some of their
Right.
business. And so we'll see them sort of evolving their business models in ways that I still think will be fruitful.
Right. I've seen Frost WP. You have done a great job with the Frost, and the design and aesthetics is just amazing.
Thank you.
Tell us what motivated to get you started on that.
So it was last summer. I was at that point really kind of unsure around WordPress still, where it was going and how things all came together. I came across an article written by Justin Tadlock on WP Tavern, and he linked to the WordPress.org. At the time, it was a beta sort of exploratory pattern directory that they were trying to start. And I went there and I saw some of these kind of basic patterns, and there was like a copy button, and I hit copy. And then I went into my blog. I was writing something. I'm just going to paste it and see what happens. And so I hit paste, and like the pattern showed up. And it was then sort of, I had that epiphany moment where I was like, wait a second. So blocks are like, obviously these sort of foundational building elements, and patterns are groups of them presented in a way. And it really started to make sense to me. And so I kind of got the idea of Frost, where I'm like, well, at a minimum, like, why don't we build like a very basic theme that sort of can serve up just prepackaged components or patterns, so that you could build a website top to bottom, like a homepage in like literally 5 clicks or like 10 seconds. And once I started to kind of get my hands dirty and figure out how this all works, it was then where I was like, okay, there's a real opportunity here now with sort of this evolution of WordPress and where it's going to do things in a way that significantly increases the abilities for people and also reduces the time to produce things that are even better than they were before.
Absolutely. I think if it is making it easy for people, then why not, right? So, Brian, apart from, WordPress and development, you are also an entrepreneur, and you have got great experience scaling, creating WordPress products. And you absolutely have so much of an experience that a lot of people like me who are at a very nascent stage, I would still consider that even after a decade. I think I've got a long way to go. What are some tips or, advices that you would like to give to the people who are just starting, or they are already in their stages of, they have already had a product, a plugin, or a theme? And what are some suggestions that you would like to give?
I always say to break through the wall. There's always a moment. I'm a runner, so like there's a thing called like the runner's wall, which in the course of a marathon is usually like 17 or 18 miles in, where you just want to give up. You want to throw in the towel. You're just done. You feel like you can't go anymore. You're mentally not capable of moving forward. And then like you kind of work through it, and then you come out of it, and then you're like, gosh, thank God I didn't quit. I've had several moments of that where I was unsure of like the path I was on. I was not sure if this is something that people would like and all of that. And usually the people who have success stories have some element of I broke through the wall. I was going to throw in the towel. I was going to quit. I decided not to. I kept going and all that kind of stuff. Like that's always the first thing I encourage people to do, is just to keep going. I know it's easy to say and sometimes hard to do, but it's true. Like, most people just don't, achieve success just like overnight and just by way of luck. So there's that. And be curious, stay curious. Christopher Columbus discovered America because he was curious. What's over there?
Right.
Like, I think often we see there's the hockey analogy. A good hockey player skates to where the puck is. A great one skates to where the puck is going to be. Well, so in that context, not only do you have to be curious, you have to have like a general understanding of what you're doing and how the hockey game works. Like I have a feeling, I have a sense, I have knowledge that the puck is going to be over there. So I'm going to take a chance. I'm going to, whatever. And so like in terms of the business world, the same thing holds true, where being curious can sometimes get you into trouble, but being curious paired with fundamental knowledge of an industry or a market really can put you in a good spot. And so that's sort of what I try to do. I like to challenge myself. I like to try new things and sort of experiment and explore, like it's really in my DNA. And so to do that too, just to stay curious and to have fun with things.
Great. I think that is an amazing advice. Staying curious. I think it comes from the heart, right? And for designers, there's nothing good than that. I mean, It needs to come from the heart. So you also mentioned running, right? You
Mhm.
run a lot.
I do. It's my creative outlet where it's the only thing I do. Well, one of a few things where like I literally can't have a computer screen open in front of me. And
Hmm.
as often as I have a computer screen open in front of me, like I need to carve out some time at least 3 or 4 times a week where I am listening to music and I'm disconnected and I'm in nature. And I still think about work, which is different than actually
Right.
being in front of a computer, but it kind of helps me sort of do that curiosity thing and explore and think about new ways to do things.
Interesting. I can totally relate to it because I do that with cycling. I
Mm-hmm.
at least cycle for 3-4 times a week, and
Mm-hmm.
just like you said, music on, and try not to think about work, but then your mind goes back to work. But I think it's something that it's extremely necessary for entrepreneurs, creative people to be able to do that.
Yes.
So tell us about some crazy stories that you had while scaling the products, especially WordPress products. You've scaled StudioPress, scaled Genesis, scaled Revolution. So you have seen those ups and downs. Tell us some stories which not only have some fun, but it can also help us learn a bit from it.
Sure. Sometimes expect the unexpected. Sometimes lucky happens, and Studio Press was an example. When I started selling Revolution theme / Studio Press, the first month I sold $10,000. The second month was 20, 40, and then 80. And so 4 months in, it was doing $80,000 a month, and it was unexpected. It was unexpected that it happened, but I also didn't want to expect that it would continue. So like there has to
Right.
be some element of how do I sustain this, and how do I sort of look at this sort of like wide lensed. And so it was at that point I was still working at my day job, and the volume that was coming through was like, I have to quit. Like this is now a real opportunity. So like
Right.
that's another sort of leap of faith that I took. And that was 2006. And so here we are, 16 years later. So it worked out in some fashion. The cease and desist letter was kind of an interesting, fun story. And here's
Right.
another one. So I was trying to do everything back in the day. I was trying to develop. I was trying to market. I was trying to manage support. I was trying to do all of these things. And I was away one weekend in a tent, and I was on my phone and I was activating forum accounts for the Studio Press customers. And that night, on a Friday night in a tent in the woods, I said to myself, okay, this is too much. I can't do it all. And you have to delegate or hire, or in this case, scale. This was like the
Right.
first sort of step of scaling, is like at some point, find people who are better than the tasks that you're doing, that especially you don't like to do. There was
Right.
several things about running the business that I didn't like to do and that I was not qualified for. And so like it's better to invest into the long-term of the company and the product and brand. And so that's just another story. I remember the night I was like, we just got to do it.
Interesting.
Yeah. And then, there was the call from Brian Clark. We talked very briefly around thesis. Brian Clark from Copyblogger was Chris Pearson's business partner at DIY Themes in thesis.
Oh,
And so when they chose to end their relationship, I remember Brian Clark called me up and said, hey, Chris and I are no longer partners. Do you want to partner up and bring Studio
wow.
Press into Copyblogger? And I was like, duh. you know Speaking of which, like I'm not a marketer. Brian Clark is a marketer, and he tripled
Copy.
Studio Press sales within a year. So like those moments of serendipity where people kind of reach out, and sometimes they're very obvious answers. Like that case it was very obvious answer.
Right.
But to be honest, that happened not too long after a failed acquisition attempt. Prior to that, we had a company that was looking into buying Studio Press, and 2 weeks before we were supposed to close, they bailed. And
Wow.
so not all stories are good. I mean, that was a really tough one because
Right.
that was a 7-figure deal that would have really made us happy, but it didn't work out. It was disappointing, but we've rebounded. Brian came into the picture. We of course merged Studio
Right.
Press into Copyblogger, and 10 years later we sold to WP Engine, and here we are.
How's life after acquisition? How's life at WP Engine?
So we sold Studio Press almost 4 years ago. I spent the first year sort of contracting and doing transition work, because I was not hired by the company at that point. I wanted to do my own thing. I needed some time to kind of just to do whatever I wanted. And so that lasted until September of this past year when Heather Bruner, the CEO, and I started talking, and she was discussing the possibility of this developer relations position. And at the time I was burnt out with product world. I had been on my own for 15 years. And, there are times, and there's a lesson here too. Sometimes it's okay to work for somebody else. Like sometimes we need seasons where we're not in control. We don't have to bear responsibility. And obviously WP Engine bought Studio Press. All of our people are still here. They've all moved up. They're all happy. And so I knew from a culture perspective, from a culture perspective, there was nothing to think about. Like I knew this was a company I wanted to work for. And so when we started discussing the job and the duties and the stuff that I would be doing, which is essentially what I was doing on my own, and the types of work I love to do, design, community building, evangelizing WordPress and products, it was a no-brainer. And so I've been here just over 7 months. I love it here. I'm building a team of developer relations. I've referred other people internally. Like it's really, really a great fit, and I really love it here. So
nice. WP Engine has become big, right? It's now huge.
We are 1,200. We have 1,200 employees.
Wow.
A lot of people don't realize that, and revenue in the hundreds of millions, and probably a unicorn. So
absolutely. If you were to value it, it definitely can become a unicorn. And I would say it's a corporation. It's no longer a company. It's a big one. Like 1,100 people is not a joke.
No, it's not. And most people don't realize it's that big, but we are that big.
Is there any other WordPress focused company that is that big? Or I think WP Engine must be the biggest.
I would say Automatic is
Automatic is a WordPress itself within the ecosystem.
I don't think so. I don't know how many people are at GoDaddy now that are WordPress specific, but Elementor's team's probably decent sized and stuff like that. But I don't think anyone is anywhere nearly as close.
GoDaddy is trying hard to get into WordPress, and
yes, they are.
For people like us, who have been using back in the day, we still don't consider GoDaddy to be a WordPress focused brand. But they have improved, I must say.
Yes.
So talking about developer relations, I think WP Engine is doing some great job at Headless. And Headless, they've recently launched another beta of Headless framework that they are working. I don't remember what it was called, but I'm closely following all the Headless development.
Yeah, it's a product line we have. It's called Atlas, and
Atlas, right?
And I'll be perfectly honest, that the Headless WordPress stuff, though I understand it from like a distance, that's as far as I understand it. Like I understand it's decoupling front end and back end, but when I hear our developers, our engineers, and our team talk about it, I'm like, it just goes way over my head. I'm like, that's great. I'm glad there's a market for it. I'm glad we've got a great product for it, but I really sort of prefer to stay sort of in the traditional WordPress space. It's my bread and butter. It's the type of people I like to work with. So, it is a thing, but it's not my thing.
Yeah, I can totally get it. So, with Headless, WordPress is going way beyond the normal use cases. So it's becoming more developer friendly, I would say. It's just the right move, I guess. So you also talked about hiring, right? You used to hire at Studio Press, and or who was the responsible person for?
Yeah, the Studio Press, as it moved into Copyblogger, the Copyblogger company was sort of the big group, and a lot of the people.
You guys were a couple of hundred people?
No, I think at our most we were at like 55.
Okay.
And so most of the people we hired were people who were kind of within our community and people who were using our products and doing things. So it was very sort of farm raised, I guess.
Right.
Obviously, WP Engine's a different story, even though there's elements of that. But we're always hiring at WP Engine. Like if you Google WP Engine careers, there's a whole site dedicated to it. I think there's probably 50 or 60 different types of openings, from, marketing to product and engineering to, customer experience and stuff like that. Our team, our developer relations team, we're actively looking for a P2 developer advocate. So That is definitely something that we're looking for. We just announced this week the community manager we've hired, Sam, and we're super excited about that. But yeah, I believe the Genesis team is also looking for a WordPress engineer. And so there's opportunities all the way around from Growth Suite and Flywheel and, WP Engine hosting. There's a lot of good things out there.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So at the time when you sold StudioPress, I guess it was, I should say the time when you sold the Copyblogger Media, it was huge, right? It's got StudioPress, then it had Rainmaker, it had a lot of other products. How were you guys managing all of it?
Well, it was tough, which is why we decided to start to sell some of the parts, because we became bigger than we wanted to. And we had several lines of business. And I told Brian Clark in Nashville at a steakhouse at WordCamp US, I'm like, look, it's time to sell StudioPress because Gutenberg was coming, whatever that meant at the time. I had no idea. And I said, unless we're willing to like double down and commit to it, using a lot of people to build this out and to follow along, it's just going to wither up, and that other people will pass us by. So let's see if we can find, somebody. We obviously have several friends in the industry. Hosting companies made the most sense. So we reached out to them. And so as a company, Copyblogger Media chose to sell that line of business, which we did. And then after that, shortly thereafter, then we sold Rainmaker to an agency, a fellow down in Dallas, Texas, named Ed Bardwell. And he bought the Rainmaker line of business. And then we were sort of left with just Copyblogger, the blog at that point. And then I had no real interest in being a part of that anymore, just because I just wanted to do other things. And so I sold my ownership in Copyblogger, which was basically the blog at the time, which then freed me up to just go do whatever I wanted. So. Right.
Interesting. So you came it completed the whole circle, right?
Pretty much.
It started as a blog, and then it ended up as a blog. Yeah. But there was huge learnings and great journey in that. So, so you sold StudioPress, and I've seen there are a lot of interesting plugins that were created for the StudioPress. So I guess that are also owned by WP Engine now.
Yeah, there were most of them center around Genesis, Genesis Simple Hooks, Genesis Simple That, or whatever. And so with the sort of semi-retirement of the framework, the plugins obviously sort of follow suit. And I think that we're actively looking to see if anybody wants to take over some of these plugins, just because there's new focus, right?
I would love to do that, because I've been working on, I'm maintaining about 10 plugins now, and I've been actively looking at products. I've actually, in the past 2 years, we have acquired 2 WordPress plugins, which was on the verge of closing. We took over that, and then we redeveloped into the whole new system. And now, I mean, there's like thousands of people are loving it. So I always like to, do that, the products which are, and it is something which I'm comfortable with. So at the end of the day, what I think about is like, what we are here because of the WordPress users, and there are thousands of people who are using. And if there are certain products which, align with our vision, then, why should the user suffer? It's like you said, right? Sometimes you need to work for somebody else, right? It kind of gives me that feeling. I just wanted to, also discuss on, while you are scaling StudioPress, and you said you have seen ups and downs, how does it affect your mental health?
That's a whole episode in and of itself. Yeah, mental health and entrepreneur and creator and all of this stuff, it is a daily battle. We have extended seasons where we're doing better or worse than other seasons. But even inside of those, like, my days are up and down, like sometimes on the hour. It's easier now, in some respect, to be working for somebody else and not have to bear the responsibility of doing the right thing and building the right product and generating the right amount of revenue. That's now the company's issue, and I've got a good job and I've got insurance and all those things.
Right.
So I don't have to worry about that as much. But then kind of with that comes the limitation of not being able to be an entrepreneur and to do all the things that you want to do, the freedom of all of that. And so, kind of in and all of that is a threaded just roller coaster of emotions where, and as a creator, I have days where I have self-doubt. I have days where I have imposter syndrome, where I see stuff on social media that makes me realize I'm not as good as I think I am. And there are other days where I'll put something out there and people will respond, and I'll, humbly acknowledge that I have a skill. And so there's a whole lot there. And the Studio Press thing towards the end, sales were starting to decline a little bit, like because we were kind of being scattered. And it was just one of those times where we all, as partners, we had been together for 10 years. And some of us were starting to do like our own side projects. And it was obvious that like it was the right time to do these bigger moves. And so we just, when you are a partner in a company, you've got, as you might know, 50 or 60 people, lives and families, like all these people depend on you. Like that's a pretty big responsibility to bear. Now, granted, we had partners and Brian was he was the CEO, so he had the most responsibility, but like I still had to answer to people whose jobs depended on what we did.
Absolutely.
So
we don't talk about much about the mental health in WordPress. I mean, there are people who just talk about it, but there still needs to be a lot of noise regarding this. And
yes.
I think every product has a life cycle. We just need to understand that. Sometimes we get so attached with the product that we feel that it needs to be used by everybody and it needs to be lived forever. And practically that's not the case. Every product has a life cycle and we are always living in some sort of a bubble, right? It's always it's always that evolution that is going on. So how do you keep yourself balanced in all of this?
I think it just goes back to just understanding, like you said, that nothing is infinite, really, especially in the tech space. And to be perfectly honest, the Genesis life cycle of 10 years was significantly longer than I think anybody expected to begin with. And it's still going strong. It's still very stable. There's hundreds of thousands of websites that are powered by it, but we're also seeing sort of a shift in the way WordPress is going. So like, I think there's a lot of understanding within the community, the people who build with it, our team who built it, just that, as I say, the unique value proposition that Genesis once served is now being replaced by WordPress core functionality. And so as often in life, when something doesn't work out, there's always an opportunity there, right? Like it's always, and do you hang on too long, or do you say, okay, things are now shifting. Let's start to focus on the new stuff and figure out the best way to transition the customer base, the people who have trusted us over the years. How do we continue that trust by just saying, we're working on something new, follow us into that journey, right? And I think we're starting to see that now kind of within WP Engine, but just the general WordPress community as a whole. And again, there's a lot of ups and downs there and people who are resistant to change and, all of those things. And so you have to deal with that too. But I'm personally, I've never been more excited about WordPress than I am today, personally. Absolutely. And that's a big, yeah.
So what's the next chapter for Brian Gardner?
My tenure at WP Engine is going to be as long as they'll have me. I really like my job. I really enjoy sort of the freedom of the responsibility that I used to bear. I'm an entrepreneur and my DNA is to think about building products and doing stuff like that. And so I can, I probably will continue to do that in some fashion on the side, just as a way to sort of exert those muscles, energy and stuff like that. So I don't know what's next. I mean, I know that we're just scratching the surface of what we're building as a team at WP Engine from developer relations perspective. I think WordPress is still delivering the final pieces of sort of the future. So there's so much more ahead. And it's just a day-to-day thing, right? Like I'm just going to continue to do my thing, which is build for WordPress, design for people,
That's great, man. That's great. I mean, you have kept open to the universe, right?
100%.
So that is the best thing. What are some hiring mistakes that you have did, which we as an entrepreneur make sure that we don't do those kind of hiring mistakes, because team is very important for the product.
Sure. Within the last year or two, I've become a really big Taylor Swift fan. And
I can
so
see that. I saw that on about page.
yes. And as part of that, I followed along her journey from when she was like 16 and singing country music to like where she's at now, which is a music mogul. And the one thing that she's done is she's reinvented herself, like from album to album. She's tried different things and built new audiences and re-identified herself in certain ways. She's maintained the songwriting, the storytelling, and the music sort of as her thread through that. And I think what happens is we get stuck in our own routine, daily routines, but even just the mindset of who we are and what we're good at and how we like to do things. And this is why this sort of color gradient thing for me has become a thing, because I'm realizing, like, and people joke about it on Twitter. Oh, Brian Gardner, it's a black and white site. Brian must have done that. And it's like, that's true. But I'm like, I need to try to grow outside of that and sort of evolve and do things in a little bit different way. And so like, I think that's the hidden thing is like, we're not just what we've been. We are who we're becoming. And so like, there's elements of that, like just trying to like, and I'm not saying to just, go from being a designer to an acrobat. Like I'm saying sort of within your skill set, like to just, to evolve and to challenge yourself and to reinvent the way you do things. And that's really kind of where I'm at personally. And I'm really enjoying that exploration. It's been fun. And I hope it continues.
Absolutely. Talking about Taylor Swift and the challenges, Kanye did really challenge her in a very unique way.
Yes. In fact, there's a documentary on Netflix called Miss Americana, which chronicles her whole life. And they hone in on that moment where he went on stage and, and all of that stuff. And
yeah, I'm gonna let you finish. Is still a thing, people still talk about and joke about that stuff. And I think there was this huge another thing which the way she has taken this I think her manager kind of screwed her up or something like that.
Yeah, somebody bought the rights to her music and basically said that was it. And so what she did was she evolved and pivoted and basically
that is huge thing. It's
she re-recorded and all of her music. And so somebody thought they had her and she went and did it a different way. And now they call it Taylor's version or something like that. Like each of the albums are being re-recorded and it's brilliant. It's the ultimate middle finger to people who think they have you down.
Absolutely. And as a creator, one can imagine the amount of stress it gives on the creator to be able to, suddenly, suppose you are creator of XYZ themes. And I know you have faced that with the Revolution and somebody suddenly knocks on the door and tells that you are no longer, and especially done by, somebody who is a manager, a part of the team, that feeling of betrayal kinds of, pushes people to evolve. They have no other option. And sometimes adversities can bring out the best versions of ourselves.
That's a fantastic way to end it.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Well said.
Thank you so much. So thank you so much, Brian, for doing this. It was such a pleasure talking to you. It was a kind of a dream come true. I maintain a bucket list. It's on my head. So it's definitely Matt Mullenweg is on that. So Brian Gardner is now checked. So it's been a huge opportunity. And thank you so much for giving me this opportunity. Whenever I'm in the Chicago, I'll definitely meet you in the nearest Starbucks.
Yes, 100%. Let me know.
Absolutely. And do you have any plans for the India?
No, I do not.
Okay. Now, while you are exploring, I've heard Steve Jobs and a lot of other people have explored a lot of good things from India, right? So you should definitely try it.
Sounds good.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Brian, for doing this.
You're so welcome. My pleasure.
Thank you. Have a good day. Bye-bye.
Yep. Take care.